Well, welcome. I'm Dan Edwards. Thanks so much for listening to my Dayton-centric podcast at Greater Dayton, where I highlight our unsung hometown heroes who inspire, entertain, and inform. And on this episode, we're looking under the hood of many Dayton area businesses. Yet it is time for a business tune-up with business coach and author Lois Elrich, when a Greater Dayton continues. Well, Greater Dayton is powered by our friends at the Dayton Business Journal. Don't make a business move without the reliable and timely and many times exclusive reporting of the DBJ. And by Pivotal Media, integrated marketing, public relations, commercial, and podcast productions. Pivotal Media LLC, moving your marketing in new directions. Stay tuned for information concerning Pivotal Media's unprecedented workforce development campaign called Be the Essential. It's designed to help employers like you struggling to attract and hire and retain quality workers, and for those looking for a higher paying job. All the details for you at BeTheEssential.com. Well, welcome back. This is a Greater Dayton podcast, episode number 96. You know, about a year ago, I sat down with my guest in her shared office space at the Entrepreneur Center in the Dayton Arcade downtown. I was told by a business associate that she was a really good business coach doing amazing work with dysfunctional businesses. Well, little did I know that very soon she would be helping me with my business to get through some very challenging and at times gut-wrenching moments. Very difficult time dealing with personnel issues. So I'm pleased to finally get on her busy schedule to talk about her services as business coach and advisor. Yes, and how many companies are looking for new ways to attract and retain quality employees. Let's bring her in. Hang on, Lois. Got to have my owner Palmer. There we go. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So, gosh, how you been?
Good.
Yeah, your company is called Real Change Business Coaching, but it's much more than coaching, isn't it?
Yeah, we
You're
do
developing
a lot.
relationship.
Exactly, and that's exactly the phrase or comment I just had with a client, that it's not about, I'm not a transactional, it's not
Right.
about the transaction, it's about the relationship.
So give me a snapshot of your client.
Ooh, snapshot. Wow, there's so many.
That's good. You must be good at your job.
Business owners, senior executives, people just trying to, they've got an obstacle. Sometimes there's an obstacle, there's something they're working on, and they need some help working through it, figuring out what that obstacle is, and then overcoming that. What are the strategies, the workarounds for that? Sometimes the engagement is just all about professional development, developing as a leader, and there's no specific goals set in mind, but I know I want to show up better, or I know that the way I'm showing up isn't serving my team ideally. So how do I show up as that ideal leader?
Is there one specific area that business struggle with?
I know you said one, but there's two, and I think they kind of go hand in hand. But one of them is accountability. Sometimes we struggle holding people accountable to whatever the role, whatever the job requirements are. We struggle having those conversations. That one is for sure a hiccup for people, is how do I have that conversation with somebody when they're not doing ideally what they ought to be doing? And a lot of times it's a fear of hurting someone's feelings. How are they going to respond to that? My feedback. So how do I hold people accountable? And I tie that in with how do I have those conversations I know I ought to have, but I've been avoiding. So helping them overcome that obstacle and coming up with a framework on, how to have the conversation, but come from a different space of joy and kindness and care versus fear. It's a totally different thing. So that crucial conversation and holding people accountable are some of the things that I see that I help clients work around.
What is your method?
We use a number of different leadership assessments. As far as communication goes, we start out with using a DISC assessment. So it's a behavior assessment that's going to identify how you go about solving problems and challenges. And
That's individual?
individual, yep. But we do it for groups as well. If you take a leadership team or even your entire organization through a communications training, everybody's going to walk away with an understanding of, oh, this is the best way to approach Dan.
Right.
And vice versa.
So it's basically a deep dive on your team and how best to handle them.
Correct. You got to spend some time with the client figuring out where it is they want to go. What are you doing that's working really well? What do you want to polish up, right? And laying out that roadmap. And what I also like to help clients understand is we're going to have a roadmap, but let's be open to pivoting as we grow and we learn through the process. We're going to learn some things and we might need to pivot what we say we're going to do, which in business, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You got to pivot.
Nowadays, for sure. That's why I called my company Pivotal.
There you go.
And speaking of that, I'm a certified body language expert, and I see more businesses hiring me to help work with them and their contemporaries, their employees, on those interpersonal communication skills that I think to a certain extent we've kind of been dulled because of the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic has really taught us a lot of things, right?
Right.
A lot about different ways we can communicate. Definitely taught us how to pivot, right? We definitely taught us that we need to pivot. The way we've been doing work and communicating, we've learned a whole new way of doing that.
Right.
However, I still think it's very important for the person-to-person, face-to-face, in that physical being in the same space is very important, because no matter how much you're on Zoom, you're only seeing a snapshot of that person, and you're missing so much of that body language, which you have, that expertise to help people understand.
Even on a virtual call, we have to work on our branding. Also carries over into our virtual meetings. As I'm hearing you, the best way to really kind of get into some of these problems, both personally and professionally, you got to be one-on-one.
Definitely. You got to start with one-on-one. Usually it's the leader, whoever has initiated the call. It's first spending time with them before doing anything else, and having that one-on-one conversation and really figuring out, usually when someone comes to you with, hey, I want to work on XYZ, there's usually something much deeper underneath. So we got to figure out what that is, and then we can work through it.
You coach just about any age, don't you?
I do. I've been mentoring some young women for a while now. Started out in junior high or freshmen in high school. So I've been mentoring and coaching some young folks. And then I have actually had the honor and the privilege to do some coaching with my in-laws.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
Are they business associates?
No, they're just my mother and my
Interesting.
father-in-law.
Well, that gets a little sticky, doesn't it?
Well, it really doesn't, because we all know, and my father-in-law passed away a little over a year ago, so this was prior to that. But we all of us are in a relationship, right?
Right.
You and I are in a relationship right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So there's relationships, and we all need help sometimes figuring out where we're at. So it wasn't sticky at all, because all of us were like, okay, how can we do this better?
So you shared with me the 5 dysfunctions of a team. What are those?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the one that you have to get right first, or none of the others will come. Right. So it's absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, inattention to results.
Inattention to results. I don't understand that.
So I was working with the team, and I was having them score and rate themselves on each of these 5 dysfunctions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust one another? So we went through all the 5 dysfunctions. And the trust one, we had some ratings anywhere from a 4, some were an 8, and we were just across the board. But there were some low scores in there. And inattention to results, that's the top of the pyramid. And everyone gave that like a 9 and a 10. And I said, you know what, that really doesn't make sense to me. How can your results be at a 9 and a 10 if you have people down here who are saying we don't have trust amongst the team? And so that made them think differently about the results they were getting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
The whole thing around like trust, that is about vulnerability-based trust, not like I trust Dan's going to always show up on time, but it's a willingness to say, I've made a mistake, I'm sorry, here's how I think I can fix it. It's that being that candid and vulnerable with other people.
Trusting that you're not going to get whacked by your boss or someone in your department, or
right. So there's psychological safety amongst the team where I can say what I need to say, and it's a safe environment.
Yeah.
I can say what needs to be said.
But I think there's few people out there that feel completely comfortable being completely honest with their boss.
So, and that's a good point you bring up. So when we talk about being vulnerable,
right,
it doesn't mean you should spill your guts to everyone. And that, you have to test the waters. You have to build that trust.
right.
And it is using some emotional self-management of, is what am I about to say, does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? So you got to manage some of that and own part of that as well. But you're right. You have to be.
Yeah. Temper yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a method in which you could have that conversation.
Gotcha. Yeah, but it's a step. It's a procedure.
It's a step.
You said some of your business coaching, Lois, some of your philosophy can be attributed to your father. Of course, your book was all about your dad. Lessons.
Yeah. I learned so much. My dad was an entrepreneur, had his own HVAC company, heating and air conditioning company.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go on service calls with him quite often when I was little. But I think I learned most from my dad. He always had these little sayings, these little life lessons that he would tell me, and I just got to learn from watching him. Like in my book, I talk about, I learned from watching him, learning what to do and what not to do, right? It's kind of like he was my example,
right.
That I got to watch and help me figure out how to navigate how to do things. Does that make sense?
Not just in business, but in life, right?
Yes, business and life,
right.
Definitely.
So what did you learn from your mom?
Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. She put up with all the shenanigans of 5 kids and a dad that was letting us, go off and ride mini bikes and jump off garage roofs into the swimming pool and mud ball fights and, But I remember growing up, my mom being out in the snow, and we'd build igloos and have snowball fights. And
fun.
She always wanted to look her best. She still does that.
Yeah, she's 81, right?
Yeah, 81. Yeah. Tomorrow's her birthday, so
fabulous.
She'll be 82.
Now, your father passed in 2017, my understanding?
Yes.
Okay. But thank goodness for your 3 kids and your 8 grandkids, right?
Yeah, I feel very blessed. I feel like there's been so many moments in my life where I get to say that was one of the best moments of my life.
Yeah.
And each one of my kids and meeting my husband, I can pinpoint to things in my life that changed my life and made it better.
Yeah. Well, you grew up in Mercer County, Kentucky, y'all. Right?
Yeah, I was born. Yeah.
And what was your childhood like? I mean, you talk a little bit about how mom was always there playing with you, and you were very engaged as a family.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Mercer County, so if you're born in Kentucky and they say, where are you born, you're going to mention the county you were born in, not the city. But I was born there, but I was primarily raised here in Dayton.
Okay.
So Dayton's my hometown. Grew up in Butler Township in a neighborhood where, in fact, my husband and I drove through it this morning, and I said, this was just such a great place to grow up. You could ride your bikes everywhere and stay out and catch lightning bugs, and you didn't have to worry about what your kids were doing or where they were at. We could just play outside.
But you were a child of divorce, though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. How did that, kind of torn between two parents?
Yeah, I was. I definitely was. And I know it wasn't intentional, from either of my parents, but I definitely felt torn, trying to decide who to visit and who to live with. One year I would go to school and live with my dad, and then that summer I'd go spend it with my mom and then go to school there in Kentucky because my mom moved back to Kentucky. So I did that for a couple of years because I got divorced when I was 12, and I started out, living in Northridge. My dad moved to Northridge, and Mom moved back to Kentucky and lived with my dad and finished out the 7th grade school year there with my dad, and then moved in the summer and got ready to go to school. I went to 8th grade in Kentucky and then came back and did freshman year in Dayton at Northridge schools, and then went back and lived with my mom for the summer, and then came back and went to school. Dad moved again and went to Colonel White my 10th grade year. Best school ever. I loved Colonel White High School.
Why?
Just the diversity of people. I had never been exposed really to that before, and it didn't matter who you were. I always felt welcome there. There was just, like I said, there was a great diversity of people. You could, you had your people who were into the sports and who were into the drama and cheerleading and, science and all that, but we still all got along. If there was any tension, which I know there's tension, sometimes when you're adolescents.
Always peer pressure, yep.
But, it just felt good.
Yeah.
I felt accepted. And when I went to my 20-year high school reunion, when my husband and I went, I felt like I belonged again. I hadn't seen him in so long, but they were just like we hadn't missed each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, you and Ken were high school sweethearts, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. In fact, I remember writing many notes in high school when I was at Colonel White to my husband. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, in May, you and Ken celebrated your 41st anniversary. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
How you do it? What's the secret?
Oh. Well, I think the secret is probably what we've all heard. I think it's being forgiving, being loving, knowing that you're going to make mistakes, knowing that you're going to have some down times, and that's okay, right? You're both trying to be the best you can be. So I think being patient, loving, remembering the positive sides of things. And I also think it's important to help hold each other accountable, to whatever it is, to the relationship or whatever it is. It's definitely a relationship. It takes both parties.
So your business coaching principles can apply to being married, right?
Absolutely.
Expectations. But pregnancy kind of kept you from attending college, but you established yourself as a valued employee. You worked at, Solid Blend, in bookkeeping with water management company and a business consultant.
So my husband worked at Southview. I think he was there 17 years in a supervisor role in facilities maintenance. And that's when he got the idea about starting our own company, a water management company. And he's a true entrepreneur, but we decided to move forward with that. So I started learning how to do books and payroll and taxes. I'm reading contracts and doing inventory and HR work. But yeah, I never did end up, I had originally thought after high school I was going to go to college, but like you mentioned, God had other plans for me.
Right. In 2009, you trained at Aileron, training in internal dialogue. Was that the beginning of your consulting business then?
Well, you could say it was, and it wasn't. So we got introduced to Aileron in 2009. In 2011 is when we actually got engaged and started attending like the course for presidents, getting an understanding of what the DOC model was. We had, direction, operation, control, and we had no idea what a vision was, a mission statement, core values. We didn't know any of that. So once we realized that we had help, there was help out there on like how to run your business, we just kept going back, and taking everything we could. We got very engaged. I remember at one point in time I asked if I could volunteer because I just loved being out there and learning from so many other people going through the same things we're going through. Then eventually I did get asked if I would want to be a facilitator. So I got trained and onboarded to the team with Aileron to do that. And then I learned about coaching, and then that's when I decided to start my own coaching, Real Change Business coaching business. I had learned about coaching. My husband had gotten coached from one of the executive coaches at Aileron, and he asked him and said, "Hey, where'd you learn to do that? I think my wife would be great at it." And then my husband sent me an email with the link to the school where I went for that training. I kept that email in my inbox, I think, for about, 4 or 5 months. I kept looking at it, saying, I don't have time for this. But I finally went and talked to Chuck out at Aileron. He's the COO out there. I went and talked to him because he was a coach. And I said, well, what can you tell me about this program? And he said, Lois, all I can tell you is it'll change your life. And I thought, well, I'm not really looking to change my life, but it sounds exciting. So I signed up and I left 2 weeks later, and boy, did I have my eyes opened up.
All right, let's back up to your family here a little bit, Lois. Did that family dysfunction give you an insight to dealing with business conflicts?
That's a good question. My answer to that is yes, because in business, we're all people. So understanding some of the things that I went through personally, I've been able to apply that when I work with people in business. Everything that I've learned in helping to start and run Solid Blend and get it to where it's got this great culture now. In fact, we've just won Best Places to Work, Healthiest Places to Work. That's what I've been able to take and use with other companies, is what I've learned in that business. But what I learned personally through the dysfunctions of my, which we all have dysfunction in our families. It's normal. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that word, dysfunction. It's just figuring out where the breakdown is and how do you make it more functional. But I've been able to take that, what I've learned through that, my own experiences, and helped people on such a deep personal level to understand that, what you're feeling is very normal and it's okay. Yeah. And we can figure out a way to get through this.
In my company's workforce development campaign called Be the Essential, we have identified 5 critical areas our young professionals are most commonly looking for in a new career: culture, purpose, flexibility, income, and job security. Are you seeing the same with your younger clients?
Definitely. People are looking for purpose, right? They want to feel valued and that what they're doing makes a difference at work. It's not like it used to be, with the older generation, which was fine, what motivated them, like my grandpa and my great uncles. It was just get in and go to work, right? You be happy you have a paycheck. It was different times. People now really want more than that, right? We want to know that we're making a difference in this world, and that when I come to work, someone's going to listen to something that I have to say. People don't leave their brains at home, right? They still want to use them. They want to use them when they come to work. And I believe most people want to do a good job. It's just something's either not clear on what that looks like. Doing a good job may look different for you than it does for someone else, so we have to create that clarity. I've coached hundreds of people and worked with hundreds of teams, and I asked them, how many of you today in this room said, I want to get up and suck at my job? And everyone chuckles about it, but they don't. No one says they want to. And so it is helping people to strive towards being that best version of you and giving them the resources that they need to do that when they come to work, because that's what they want to do. They want to do a good job.
So how do we engage this younger generation? Just more one-on-ones and
Well, I think it's talking to them and asking them what they need, what it is that they need and they value most, and finding out what are the things that are most important to them and how can they bring that to the table.
how do we resolve these issues between clashing generations?
So that's a good one. And I think here's what I've learned. It's not really a generational gap, it's an experience gap, right? The younger generation doesn't have the older generation's experience. So we can't expect them to come in and be like the older generation. So how do we close the gap? How do we give them what they need? They're going to need that experience. They can't be something they've never been, right? They just don't have that experience. So I think that would help people with, we can change that mindset that there's a generation gap towards there's an experience gap.
Today's new workforce want to know their future is secure. How do we address this, just you, in a very insecure business environment?
That's a good question. Well,
I ask only good questions.
yes, you do.
I hope.
Well, I think there are ways that we can provide security with any generation, but specifically you're mentioning the younger generation and the workforce that we have. And I think it's having key performance indicators. You got to look at your key performance indicators to know how your organization's doing. And when you can share with people how the organization is doing, looking at those KPIs and help people understand how they impact that number, I think that we can create security that way. People need to know. And the other thing they also need to know is, what is your vision? What is my future here, right? Ken and I never knew any of that stuff until we met Aileron. We were just showing up and doing the work.
Right.
We didn't know where we were going to be in 5 years, and people didn't know it either. So I think you can provide some security by talking to them about their future, sharing the KPIs, and helping them understand how they impact those things.
Which gets to your original point, is you got to have trust in a company. They have to trust you know what you're doing.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to have a complete reboot with how business handles pay transparency? Seems to be a thing right now. You can have apps that show you what companies are paying. I mean, I've never seen that before. Our generation, you just, everything, you never talked about your pay.
Right. And it was funny you mentioned that because I've never discussed pay, like whatever my income was.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of a private thing. But you're right, it's all out there, right? You can see. And I think there's some importance to that. I think there's this one thing also where we're in that environment right now where people are demanding such high wages that it's not sustainable. This is going to change. But I think it is important to have some standards of, what are the wage bands for the industry in this demographic area. I think it is important to have those things so that you know that you're paying. You want to make sure you're paying your people accordingly.
Competitive.
Right. You want to be competitive, so you need to know what's out in the market. But I do think we're in that a strange environment where people are really demanding more. But it's going to change because it's just not sustainable.
You're about my age, right? When we grew up, we didn't talk about money. You didn't talk about religion. You didn't talk about politics, and you certainly didn't talk about SCX, right? But now these young adults, they want everything's on the table for them. I mean, how does our generation adapt to that, or should we?
Ooh, that's a good question also.
Another
good question, Dan. Ideally, it would be great if we can have the conversations that are relevant to the business.
To the business.
If you happen to be in the business of politics, then naturally you would be talking about that.
Right.
But I think your conversations when it comes to the business need to be relevant to the business, and whether it's going to help the business thrive or, how is this conversation going to help the business? That's what I think the conversation should be about if we're talking about business.
just frame it as business only here.
Yeah. Well, you can have those personal conversations, like if you need to have some one-on-one time that maybe it's not work-related, but it might impact your work. Maybe there's something going on in your personal life.
Right.
I think it's great if you can have a culture where you can go to your manager and have that conversation. Again, the trust, the vulnerability, I need to share this with you because it may impact how I show up. Mm-hmm. I still want to do a good job, but I just need you to know that. That's a different conversation. So, but I think in general, as a business in a whole, conversations need to be relevant to the organization.
Lois, with this hybrid workforce, will boots on the ground ever fully come back from what you see?
I mean, from what I can see, it depends on the industry, right? So like our water management company, we are boots on the ground. We have to have people. You can't, it's not a work from home job. You can't do it. But I do think we're going to have a mix. I think we're now going to have a mix for those jobs that can work from home, whether it's an administrative role or something of that nature. I think that'll always be around.
Does that make your job harder with not the entire culture under one roof?
You have to work at it harder. You have to be more intentional. And I feel like culture, you have to keep your eye on your culture. I don't care how good your product is. If you don't have a good culture, it's not going to matter. So you got to keep your eye on that culture. And if you're having this hybrid roles where people are working remote, we have an employee working from Florida. So how do we make sure that this person stays engaged in the culture? What are the activities we're doing to keep this person who's so far away engaged and part of the team?
Yeah. I read that remote workers are more likely to be passed over for promotions simply because out of sight, out of mind. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think that's something that we're still navigating and figuring out. It depends on, I guess, the role, right? If you're going to be in a position where you're supervising and leading other people, you're going to need to have some face-to-face interactions at some points and times. But I think, yeah, you can be out of sight, out of mind. If you're not showing up, and you might get passed over. But I haven't really read much into that.
I ask all of my guests on A Greater Dayton, Lois, this final question. How do we all make it a Greater Dayton?
I'm a person that's all about people. So I think the more that we can help each other be the best versions we can be, we could all be better. So how do our businesses, how do we support local businesses? How do we help business leaders develop their teams? How do we help them create a great culture? How do we help people understand that even though we're different, we're all basically a lot alike, right?
Right.
You know, we all want to be happy. We all want to, get the things that we want in life. We want to pay our bills and stuff. So I think if we could just remember that we're all human, right? Mm-hmm. We're all trying to do good. I think if we could just help each other a little more and be more considerate and thoughtful and have some empathy, that might be a lot, but
something to strive for. Just remember, we're all part of this big dysfunctional boat.
Yeah.
We're all just trying to get our way through this, no question about it. Well, Lois, thank you so much for your honesty and your candor about your life, and thank you for impacting our Dayton region workforce in a very positive way.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share some of my experiences.
Yeah, and let's talk about your book just a little bit. I mean, it was recently released. The title and how we get a copy of one.
The title is called Some Things to Think About, Lessons from My Dad, mm-hmm. and you can find it on Amazon.
Okay.
Barnes & Noble is also there. You could even go check it out at the local library here.
All right. And how do we find out more about your business training services?
You could go to my website. It's realchange.life, and you can learn anything there, or you can reach out. You could email me at lois@realchange.life.
Thanks for being with me today, Lois.
Thanks, Dan.
A Greater Dayton is powered by the Dayton Business Journal. Grow your business, advance your career, and simplify your work life with a digital subscription to the Dayton Business Journal. Start your premium digital subscription right now. It's an investment in you and your future. Greater Dayton is also brought to you by Pivotal Media, LLC. If you're looking for a job or you're looking for a higher paying job, you need the one-stop resource of the website BeTheEssential.com. Pivotal Media's unprecedented workforce development campaign. Interested? Well, go to BeTheEssential.com. Find your future, not just a job. And Pivotal Media is also a proud sponsor of Extreme STEM Leagues, middle schoolers and high schoolers training in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, who, in a very fun way, build robots, put them in the cage, and do battle with their bots. Extreme STEM also has leagues in drone soccer, which is so cool. Pivotal Media is looking for partners to sponsor a team. If you'd like to impact the youth of tomorrow, leading to a fulfilling career, maybe your future employee, just go to extremestem.org for more information. That is the letters XTREMESTEM.org. Well, this has been a Pivotal Media production. Pivotal Media, integrated marketing, public relations, commercial, and podcast production services. PivotalMediaLLC.com, moving your marketing in new directions. Like and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Dan Edwards. As always, thank you so much for your interest in our podcast and your interest in the Dayton region. For connectivity to this episode's guests, just check the episode show notes. Also, if you have a question, comment, concern, just like and share my What's Up with Dan Edwards Facebook page. I urge you to tell other like-minded people about a Greater Dayton podcast. Please like and share. And by the way, you can binge listen to all 96 episodes of A Greater Dayton on Spotify. Now it's time for you, my friend, to go out and make it a Greater Dayton.